Apollo 11 first landed on the moon on July 20, 1969. It all started with the space race. In 1956, the Soviet Union launched the satellite Sputnik. 2 years later, when President Dwight D. Eisenhower was in office, a new space program, Project Mercury, was initiated. 7 men participated in the program. In 1961, Yuri Gagarin, a Soviet cosmonaut, became the first man to orbit Earth. A cosmonaut is the term for a Soviet astronaut. On March 25, 1961, President John F. Kennedy stood before Congress and delivered a special message.
We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
The National Aeronautics and Space Administration, more commonly known as NASA, started working. They had to choose between 2 projects, Gemini and Apollo. Both projects could possibly land on the moon. NASA decided Apollo would work better. On January 27, 1967, a fire broke out during a manned launch pad test of Apollo 1. Gus Grisman, Ed White, and Robert Chaffee died. On October 11, 1968, Apollo 7, the first successful manned Apollo mission, was launched. Saturn V boosters were used to make Apollo 11 because they were the only ones powerful enough to accomplish the mission. It was time to choose the crew. Edwin Aldrin, also known as Buzz Aldrin, was chosen to be the lunar module pilot. Neil Armstrong was chosen to be the commander. Michael Collins was chosen to be the command module pilot. After a lot of preparations, they were finally ready. On July 16, 1969, at 9:32 Eastern Daylight Time, Apollo 11
6,
launched.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
We got a roll program. Neil Armstrong reporting the roll and pitch program, which puts Apollo 11 on a proper heading.
The rocket traveled 240,000 miles in 27 hours and entered into lunar orbit on July 19. On July 20 at 1:46 p.m., the lunar module, also called the Eagle, separated from the command module, also known as the Columbia. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin went into the Eagle and left Michael Collins in the Columbia. 2 hours later, the Eagle started the descent to the moon. The Eagle's boosters were too powerful, and they overshot where they were initially supposed to land by almost 4 miles. They had to keep going because there were boulders and craters. They had 17 seconds of fuel left before the Eagle automatically stopped. At 4:17 p.m., the Eagle landed on the moon, and Neil Armstrong radioed to Mission Control in Houston, Texas, to say the famous quote, "The Eagle has landed." They landed on a part of the moon called the Sea of Tranquility. At 10:39 p.m., 5 hours ahead of the schedule, Armstrong opened the hatch of the lunar module and made his way down the ladder. As 1/5 of the world's population was watching, he said another famous quote.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Buzz Aldrin stepped on the moon at 11:15 p.m. They took pictures, ran a few tests, spoke with President Nixon, and planted a U.S. flag. This took up most of their time because they could only stay on the moon for 2.5 hours. They also jumped around to show how gravity affected them.
Hippity hoppity, hippity hopping over hill and dale. Da 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 da. Hippity hopping along.
At 1:11 a.m. on July 21st, Both astronauts were back in the lunar module. A plaque, a small disc imprinted with goodwill messages from world leaders, and an American flag were left on the moon. Armstrong and Aldrin slept on the moon. When they were taking off at 1:54 p.m. on July 21st, the Eagle's boosters were too powerful and knocked the flag over. Later missions on the moon made sure to put the flag farther away from the lunar module so it wouldn't fall over. At 5:35, the Eagle and the Columbia docked. At 12:54 a.m. on July 22, Apollo 11 started its journey back to Earth. It splashed down in the Pacific Ocean on July 24 at 12:50 p.m. The astronauts were quarantined for 3 weeks to see if the moon had any effects on their bodies and to protect others from possible moon germs. President Nixon came to visit them. After Apollo 11 came Apollo 12, 14, 15, 16, and 17. The Apollo 13 mission was unsuccessful. Apollo 11 is still the most popular space mission.